Hi, I'm Jennifer Benolken, and I am a MDM regulatory specialist with DuPont Tyvek for healthcare applications. I'm here today with Damian Rodriguez from Braun, and I'll have Damian introduce himself.
I am Damian Rodriguez. I'm with Braun Medical and the director for labeling and product identification. Part of my responsibilities is supporting North America for packaging engineering operations.
Excellent. Welcome, Damian. It's really exciting to be here talking with you today. We're going to talk about, I think, something that many medical device manufacturers have dreams of doing, and many don't necessarily have the ability to do so. So, we're going to provide them a little bit of a roadmap on consolidation of different packaging SKUs and basically just have a really fun conversation about packaging. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right, I need to put my glasses on so I can read. Okay, so Damian, can you tell us a little bit about the initiative that your company worked on and some of the strategies and background behind it?
Well, just first of all, kind of like a quick intro to our company. We serve the fluid therapy and injectable drugs market. And our medical operations, where we're going to discuss more today in terms of these materials we use. Our medical operations support the delivery systems of those drugs and the pain management aspect of that. And on that, just on pain management, we serve over 600 different products between epidural, spinal, nerve block products for anesthesia. And on the delivery side of drugs, it's over 3,000 products from vascular products like IV catheters to IV gravity pumps to IV gravity sets to IV pump sets, fluid transfer and accessories. So a lot of different products and on, thousands of different ones. And when it comes down to project we're discussing about standardization, having all of those products, yeah, they are all different in a way, but at the same time, they have many commonalities. They are grouped together as different families based on the customer use case, but they also share components, different similar components. And we're always trying to find ways to be more efficient in handling all of this diversity. In the packaging area, we have placed a lot of focus on standardizing and creating commonalities as well. So these products ultimately could vary in size and geometry, but the actual packaging that it's taking place in the same location, they have similarities in terms of the sterilization process and the distribution process. So based on these commonalities, we also wanted to create commonalities in terms of the processing technologies that we use and the packaging platform in terms of materials that we use to processing them.
So, what I'm hearing you say in there is you have a wide variety of different devices that you're looking at packaging with a variety of different shapes and geometries that you are contending with. So, not necessarily a lot of similarities across the board, but the place where you operate to make them and package them, and then the sterilization modality that you use is similar. And so you were able to build off of it from those commonalities. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, yes.
Okay, fantastic.
Yes, and with that, other commonalities start taking place, like the technologies we use to identify them, as an example, and the requirements for, based on the, I guess, the type of products, the requirements when it comes to the packaging in general. And when we look at design requirements, they have to be sterile, they have to be compatible with our sterilization method that we use. Is the most common one, and probably the one that we use the most is ethylene oxide. So it has to be compatible with that. It has to be compatible with how we identify them in terms of those technologies like printing applications that we use. So they all have that commonality. And with that, then it brings the opportunity for standardization. And that's the strategy behind that we're going to talk today, is how we take advantage of those commonalities to start building standardization around the processing technologies and the materials.
So what was the first thing that kind of tipped you off as to like, hey, we should probably do something about this? Did you have like a prolific number of packaging SKUs, a kind of whole bunch of different things going on? Like, what was it that tipped you off to say, hey, we could probably do something better here?
Yeah, it's the complexity of managing that. If you have custom made packaging or packaging materials for these different product families, it starts getting more complex to manage it, because then you either need different technologies to process them, or you just need a bigger amount of materials that you have to use in order to pack them. But also they are all used together, either on in the same hospital, maybe in different areas of the hospital, or in different applications. So one of the things is also that we want to have this common appearance across the board, that is all part of this same brand, that is B Brown, and that people are familiar with our products when they see it. So that's another motivation as well, and a trigger point.
Excellent. So when you started out the project, everything was on form fill seal, or did you have some form fill seal and some standalone sealers like shuttle sealers and kind of like a wide variety of different processes that were used to actually create the package?
Yes, and we had a mix of pouch sealers, tray sealers, and function seal packaging as well. So we have transitioning over to use more of a function seal technology. We still have, and we do have capabilities to, and there are pros that make sense to packaging other packaging technologies, but our core, our core is to use the function seal application.
Okay, so you were trying to
And
kind of put everything into a form fill seal operation as much as you could.
yes, because it's a more efficient way. From our understanding, it's just on our perspective and experience with these other applications, it is more efficient, provides more opportunities to automate certain steps in the process. So pouch sealer, you have to manually put it in, plus the loading application takes more time consuming in a pouch than on a form and seal application. Same will be said with tray sealer if it's a manual tray sealer application. So we found that for high volume products, it was the best application we have. And then I think as over time, we've learned that, hey, now that you have this platform and this technology in place, you can start bringing in all of these other lower runner products in as well, and they can benefit from economy of scales and improvements that you made around that process.
Okay, so before going into this project, you had pouches, you had trays with lids, you had form fill seal, so you had roll stock coming in from a both bottom and top web. You now started consolidating to a form fill seal application. You talk about customization versus standardization in some of the preparatory calls for this discussion. Can you talk about how you went about customizing and
Um,
standardizing, I guess? I mean, it's a little bit
yeah,
of both, right?
it has a little bit of both, and I think it all comes down to your application. So we can have multiple sizes even in the Profi and Seal package, but you have to again leverage on commonalities, right? And then you have to look into, okay, what is your bigger footprint across multiple packaging sizes? So based on that bigger footprint, then you start planning for that, and then you try to find ways to out of that bigger footprint then come with smaller footprints that could fit on that bigger
Sure.
footprint. So it's kind of like trying to fit frames within frames
Yep.
or trying to have this big Lego set where you can convert some into split it and convert it into smaller pieces. So that's kind of like our approach. So we look into that bigger one, and if it's if it still makes sense to have that bigger one in the front and seal, or like I mentioned, there are some instances where we still do like a tray sealer or a pouch sealer for something that is just too odd to fit in that frame. But we try to have the critical mass in there, because then we can leverage the roll stock materials we use across multiple products.
So this was no small feat. I'm sure you had to do some convincing before you were able to start on this. It's not like something that you can just kind of work on in the background. It's a pretty big process to go through. Who did you have to convince, and how did you go about convincing them as you headed into this project?
It has an impact on the whole operations, from the
Absolutely.
operation side, but also on the customer side as well. There's a lot of information in the industry about preferences of trays versus pouch versus these 3D blisters that you can make on the roll stock. So there's information there that helps with
Hmm.
that. There's common knowledge about certain pouches out there that are not preferred, and there's certain tray applications that provide challenges for disposal, as an example. So in general, this brings the 3D aspect that you have on a tray, that you can form different shapes and sizes, and you have a truly 3D packaging that performs better when you have bulkier products versus a pouch. So on that end, on the user perspective, there was a lot of common understanding on that. But also on the operation side, it becomes more also about the cost of goods made, right? You know, how
Yep,
much
yep.
it takes to make it, and what's the return of the investment. It could be a big capital investment when you're trying to go out of pouch to a from and seal packaging technology. It could be quite a lot, but then you have the cost of the actual good that you are affecting. You can have a more efficient design that takes less real estate, and that adds up into the cost of the product. So going into that, the challenge was to show the benefits of that through your common analysis, financial analysis for business case. You have to have a strong ROI for it. So that's the part that you have to do work. You have to make sure it makes business sense
Yeah,
from the
absolutely.
cost standpoint. So that's the job that was done. And we're very successful in doing that, and showing that it's a better path forward.
So you basically ultimately proved that once the project was completed, when you include all of the costs of doing the project, all of the activities, which would include additional capital equipment and form fill seal equipment, is no small cost, right? So
Yeah.
even with that, all of the testing that you needed to do, all of the redesign of the packaging around the sterile barrier system, so any shelf cartons, shipping cartons, pallet configurations, all of that work still proved that it would be more cost beneficial to be Braun to go that path as opposed to continuing to work the way that you had been working. Can you talk about the cost savings that you have experienced as part of doing this process? I think that's probably
So
going to be one of the most interesting aspects.
I mean, it all depends on everyone's different situation, and every product had a different scenario coming from. We have some very bulky products, we have some simple accessories, and I cannot talk maybe about a number, but there are different areas where you can see benefits.
Mhm.
So from the inventory management, having to manage one item, one roll stock versus maybe dozens or hundreds of pouches, depending on what you're looking at, that makes a big benefit, right? Consolidating all of that into one item, it's gonna put you in a better situation when it comes to looking at the material costs, but also having the opportunity to have this package that is more close in terms of shape and size to your product could provide you good benefits in terms of your overall cube usage when you're talking about transporting thousands of products from one place to another. When you're talking about the sterilization process, using that sterilization chamber as efficient as you could use it, provides benefits, and just the transportation costs in general, but also showing the customers you care about. Ultimately, you care about the sustainability aspect of this, using materials in a responsible manner. That's something that's forefront of this decision making process as well.
So, with the number of different packaging configurations that you had before to what you have now, can you talk about like, did you have 20, 40, 80 different packaging configurations and now you're down to three or four?
We across thousands of pros where we are not down to three or four. There are certain pro families where we had maybe 80 some configurations, and now we have like five or six. And then there are areas where we had literally either hundreds of configurations and we're down to like half of that. So it's still, I would say, process where we could find opportunities to keep improving and standardizing and coming to less sizes, but we certainly were in a spot where we at least have twice as much.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Now, let's talk about materials. How did you determine the materials that you were going to use? Because again, with all of the wide variety of packaging configurations you had before, there was probably quite a few different material combinations. How did you determine what the new material combination was going to be and then just kind of apply that across the board?
I will say like this, it comes down to the requirements of your packaging in terms of, for example, as I was mentioning earlier, in terms of the sterilization process. So that plays a big role in terms of what material we were selecting. Also, the same, I guess, narrative in terms of the size and the worst case scenario for the size, it comes down into play into the mechanical properties. So in that, sometimes you have to make some compromises because in an effort to standardize, you could end up maybe using materials that you could challenge. Maybe we could down gauge here or there for certain products, but then the benefit is that you have a standard material that you use across the board, and it opens it up for other opportunities in terms of how quick we can get to the market if we're coming with something new, for example.
So really economies of scale, not only in the material combination reduction that you're using, but also from a product development standpoint, going into some of the design verification testing and stability testing that you needed to do. You know, stability is a big topic right now in
Yeah.
industry, and it takes a long time and a lot of money for materials that we commonly use throughout industry. How did you tackle the stability side of things?
So going over that in terms of the material selection, just before going to stability, and we're gonna go into stability with this, is that even though on the material selection aspect, there are certain drivers that are unique to the package size, like the transportation aspect, but there's a lot of the material characterization that is common. And that's something that you're able to leverage. And if you have something very specific to each and every size, then you have that cost burden as you're implementing those. So that commonality plays a heavy part on the decision making process, but also then on the stability, like you mentioned, you can define strategies in terms of the different sizes. So you can have 40 different sizes, but there are commonalities in terms of the material combinations that the technology you use into, and you can have validation strategies around that help you bracket some of the sizes and reduce, and then try not to repeat stability testing on all of the sizes. So ultimately, you're challenging how the material performed through stability, how your seals perform through stability. That is something that's common also,
Mm-hmm.
because you
So
have,
you can do it
these
once
two
and apply
surfaces
it
are
many
not
times.
changing. Yeah, so you can leverage that, and that makes a big difference when you have to do that maybe just a few times rather than repeating it every time you have this new package coming up or this new size coming up. So that's something that definitely we were able to leverage with this, and setting up a platform, having those testing data points done there so that once something new comes up, you evaluate it against what you do, and you make decisions in terms of, does this covers you for this new product or this new package size, or you have to go back and redo certain things or all. That's an assessment that everyone has process established to do that, and we certainly have one strong process behind that.
So, Damian, if you could summarize the entire project, going from generalization of the number of different packaging configurations that you started with and what you went down to, and maybe summarize some of the cost savings that you were able to realize as a company as part of that, and then kind of go into the ROI a little bit, like how long did it take you to pay for that project?
So, I mean, a project like this is all driven by the volumes that you can have. It's a matter of volume, talking about roll stock, equipment to handle roll stock. But depending on your volume, it could be down to a year, depending on the volumes you're looking up, and or it could be multiple years.
Okay.
It's just different scenarios take place, but a lot of it is volume driven. So the opportunity here is to try to find those commonalities between products so you can make up the volume. If you're looking at a standalone product, maybe a low runner, it might not pay off on itself.
Sure.
And that's the opportunity, I guess, and the key aspect here.
So you went after the high runners first and then kind of trickled down. This had to have been a multi-year project.
Yes, and it's an effort that started probably way before I joined it with the company. It was a vision that we had way before. We were very good at this, not only in our US region, but globally. So it's just the way we decided to move forward in terms of packaging for med devices.
As we're closing up here, any words of advice to people considering taking on such a project?
I would say defining the technology that you're going to use, even within from free and seal, there's different technologies out there. And if you're going to be loading manually or automatically, it plays a big part. But also the material selection, it's very important. Something that is flexible and scalable, something that even within the material structure, you can down gauge or go up, then you can probably test at those limits of your gauges, even within the same material. That's something very important because it gives you opportunities to take some of the odd products that you might have coming in, because there's something that's always very odd, or there's something that's always very challenging when it comes to the cost and how competitive it might need to be. So that's key aspects there that I will ask everyone to consider.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your conversation today, Damian. I really appreciate your taking the time to share the learnings that you've had through this project. I'm sure if people reach out to you, you'd be more than willing to help kind of give some pointers and tips of some of the challenges that you went through along the way. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Look forward to catching up with you again sometime soon.
Absolutely.